Delighted to introduce Dr. Aaron Balick. He's a psychotherapist, cultural therapist, and author, applying ideas from psychology to culture and technology. He's an honorary senior lecturer at the Department for Psychosocial and Psychoanalytical Studies at the University of Essex. His books include The Psychodynamics of Social Networking, Connected Up Instantaneous Culture, and the Self and the Illustrated Children's Self-Help book, Keep Your Cool, How to Deal with Life's Worries and Stress. And most recently, The Little Book of Calm, Tame Your Anxieties, Face Your Fears, and Live Free. Aaron is the director of Still Point Spaces, an international psychology, co-working, therapy, and events hub based in London.
Thanks very much, Nick. I appreciate that. And big thanks for Mark, too. I think what Mark is doing and sharing his experience vulnerably is really important, because I think a lot of us are suffering inside with anxiety or vulnerability or suicidal thoughts or whatever it might be, and we often feel like the only ones doing that. So to have people out there expressing their experiences openly is really helpful for everyone, and it's a really important take home too for everyone listening today. Can you find some space in your lives to be authentic and open and share your fears, not just with your therapist, but also possibly with your coworkers. We're all kind of in this thing together. Before I kind of go into what I sort of prepared to talk to you about, I want us to stop just for a second and in a sense, catch up with ourselves. If you're anything like me, if your experience is anything like mine, the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks has been a little bit crazy. We've had enormous global social change, and most of us haven't caught up with ourselves about it. And I understand this through my own clinical practice, where people come to see me and it's like, okay, let's just take a breather. Let's find out where you are. When massive changes like this happen, often people go into what is called a manic defense, which is kind of like this super hyper, doing everything you need to do to control a situation or to prepare or whatever it is. And the example that I like to give is, if you've ever written up an exam in your life, it's, when you need to hoover the house before you start finishing your essay or before you start studying, sort of this doing to get away from the thing that's scaring you. So in order to help us catch up, and this is a little bit unusual in a webinar, is I do want to ask everybody who's watching to come to themselves, to look at me, and we're just going to take a couple of deep breaths together. Yeah, it's almost 3:30 UK time. You've probably been in front of your computer all day or in front of a screen all day. You've probably been frenetically going all over the place all day like me. You've heard two of us speak already. You're going to hear me. So let's just catch up with ourselves. And it really helps as a grounding exercise to take a big, long, deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. So I'm going to do one, and hopefully you can do one with me. Just a really long one right into the stomach. And when you do the exhale, nice and slowly, I also want you to feel your feet on the floor. So if you're sitting at your desk or anywhere, uncross your legs, put both of your feet on the floor, and we just want to ground a little bit. We're just going to do this 2 more times, so we kind of just come into our bodies and into ourselves so that we're attentive and present for the next 10 minutes of the talk. So here we go again. I know it's a little bit weird, but bear with me. Okay, in through the nose. Right down, breathing into the stomach. And a long, slow exhale out through the mouth. And I'm going to let you do the next one in your own time. And I just want you to reflect a little bit on what that experience was like for you. Often in a clinical session, we will say, what was your level of anxiety before you did this exercise? And they might say it was a 7 or an 8. And then sometimes you do these breathing exercises, you ground yourself into the floor, and it kind of can drop to a 4 or a 3. For some people, it makes them more anxious because it gives them some space to think when they're trying to fill their consciousness with distraction, to stop being anxious. But actually, in some ways, that second kind of anxiety is better for you because it's a more direct relationship to what's going on. And what I'm going to be talking about today is, let's talk about having only the anxiety and fear that is absolutely necessary and no more than that. Okay? Only the anxiety and fear that is absolutely necessary and no more than that. We are allowed to be a little bit afraid, a little bit worried, and a little bit concerned about what's going on. It would be too much of an ask to say we must be feeling completely calm and settled about this, but we also don't need to worry more than we ought to, okay? So I'm just gonna break this up into two different things. So I'm going to talk about the challenges that coronavirus offers us, and then some of the solutions about how we deal with these challenges. Dr. Papadopoulos talked a little bit about this, that actually there's something about this virus that does not just attack certain receptors in our cells, but it attacks certain psychological and emotional things that make us feel secure in our lives. She mentioned this thing about uncertainty, which is a big one for us. But if you think about any normal human being's main concerns in everyday life when we're not in a situation like this, what will they say? They're concerned about their financial security, they're concerned about their health, and they're concerned about the health of their loved ones. And here we are in a challenge that challenges all of these things. Thrown on top of that, all of our rituals and orders have been completely thrown out in the past 2 weeks. So we are not commuting to work and being at work and coming home. We're at home, some of us in better situations than others. So all of the normal ways in which we would deal with these kinds of anxieties have been turned upside down too. So how do we create an environment in which we can hold these anxieties in the most reasonable way as possible without overdoing it, but without expecting too much of ourselves? So it's quite a lot. Yeah, we're not all Zen monks. We can't just accept everything that comes along as if it's nothing. It's fine to be afraid, just not too afraid. So what kind of solutions should we be thinking about? Dr. Linda also mentioned this, which I'm going to expand upon a little bit, which is what actually makes anxiety, right? And it's this thing about ideas about something that's going to happen and whether we can manage it or not. And there's a little equation in psychological maths that I like to use that describes this pretty well. And we say anxiety is the overestimation of harm multiplied your underestimation of your capacity to cope with that harm. I'll just say that one more time. Your overestimation of how bad things are going to be multiplied by your underestimation of how well you can cope with it. And I have seen this 100,000 times because I have been working clinically for 20 years. The anxiety that we anticipate about things that are going to happen is never as bad as the thing that happens. Because actually, when the thing happens, we find that we have the coping skills to meet with the challenge. We're less anxious because we're dealing with the challenge. Now, that doesn't mean that that challenge is pleasant, but it means the challenge isn't about worry, it's about response. So one of the things that we really need to do is check back within ourselves and kind of work out, as Linda was saying, how reasonable are these expectations? And am I experiencing fear because I'm projecting anxiety forward onto something that hasn't happened yet and imagining I won't be able to deal with that situation? This really does us no good, and it really doesn't really help us prepare for what's coming. What helps us prepare is for us to be grounded in the moment and to be physically, emotionally, and psychologically ready when that thing comes, and to trust ourselves a little bit along the way. Now, some of the things that we're losing in these challenges are things like structure, complex interpersonal relationships, seeing different people every day that we're talking to, routines, and certain kinds of distractions. Now, when you lose these sorts of things, you kind of get these holes in your diary that you can fill in with catastrophic fantasies of what's going to happen. So in a sense, we don't want to make more time for these anticipated worries. So we really have to start managing them much better. How do you?
Aaron, the connection seemed to be a bit funny. I'm getting some feedback. I don't know.
Is it 10?
Or that might be better. Try now. We've lost you, sir. If people can bear us with for a minute, Aaron, keep trying.
How about now?
Perfect.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, how much did you lose?
Not that much, maybe the last minute or so.
Okay. Right. So I guess basically I'm saying if we have these kind of holes in our structures, we're likely to fill those holes with a kind of anxious thinking. So one of the things that we need to do is be much more active about how we create those structures in our life. In the world that we had 2 weeks ago, we were able to be passive about these sorts of things because our lives structured for us. We had to be at work at a certain time. We had to be home at a certain time. There were all these sorts of things that we needed to do. Now we really need to take responsibility for that ourselves. And we really need to take responsibility, particularly for the things that are missing. Sound okay?
Yeah, all good. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Okay. What are the things that are missing? Okay. And the thing that's also missing is the passive interpersonal experience that we have every day. And what I mean by passive is, able to contact people that you're in contact with, the people in your workspace, the people in the local takeaway, your regular places, regular eye contact, regular touching. These things are missing. So one of the things that I really implore you, if you're a team leader or a manager or a boss or a director in some kind of a way, is that all of these invisible structures that ensured that your team was emotionally and psychologically competent have disappeared. And they are not individually going to be implementing those kind of structures themselves. And it's very hard to implement those structures when you're working online. However, you can a bit more. So I would ask you, how are you running your Zoom meetings, for instance? How are your conversations working across Slack if you use something like that? How are you maintaining communications in your teams? And what we need to be doing is addressing that the nature of our communications have shifted. I think Nick was saying in the very beginning, it's all very well and nice when we have a big speaker event and you can have a warm body on the stage speaking at you and you can shake their hand afterwards and there's this high level, high complexity interaction. That is actually a psychological good to have that high complexity interpersonal reaction. And when we don't have that automatically, we have to make it, which means putting a little bit more effort into it. So can you create some kind of routines for your team? Can you check in on Slack, for example, in the morning, find out how everybody's doing? Can you do, in a sense, without becoming a psychotherapist or a counselor, have a little bit of a check-in? So have a little 10-minute section at the beginning of a team Zoom meeting and asking people how they're getting on, asking people if they have concerns about their health or the health of loved ones. You can limit it so it's just a check-in, but in a similar way to what Mark was saying, this is not the in-depth conversation on the side of the bridge, but this is a sign that says, I am listening to you. Yes, we have a task to be done. Yes, we're still in a workplace, but I'm also providing some kind of recognition. When you're in the teams, what kind of support can you give to each other? What kind of awareness do you have about each other's families? I mean, I think one of the great opportunities that coronavirus brings is suddenly we're in each other's houses all the time as well. So you're having like a Zoom meeting with your boss, who maybe you thought was the most conscientious person in the world. And then you just see like behind them, it's like a jumble sale at home. So you kind of get this insight into these people's lives. And a lot of the training that I do around systems and organizations is I kind of deconstruct this idea of achieving a work-life balance. There is no such thing as a work-life balance because work is life. It's just a particular manifestation of life. And you have to take great care of that manifestation because it's the way people seek recognition, get recognition, have important relationships in their life, get validated, and most importantly, particularly if you're lucky, how you express yourself and people receive that expression in the workplace. So work is a really important aspect of self-actualization. The risk in moving into at-home working and working over Zoom and working over Slack is it starts to be about productivity again, or what's getting done and what are the tasks that need to be done. Let's not forget the really important function here that we're working in a challenging environment, that most people at the moment are concerned about their jobs, their health, their loved ones, and the uncertainty that's arising. Without turning it into group therapy, can we create some room within the workspace to recognize the challenges, to incorporate them into the systems that you have, and to be human about this crisis in the way that we are with each other? So just to sum up, if you're holding these spaces in the sense of being team leaders, employers, directors, can you better hold these spaces that are emotionally intelligent and psychologically intelligent for your teams? And if you're not holding these spaces, if they're being held for you, what spaces can you hold for yourself in your own personal routines? Can you, for example, do a short breathing exercise like we just practiced between calls? Yeah, you don't need to do a 20-minute meditation session to take a few deep breaths and center yourself so you're not going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. Can you create some space in your life to psychologically and emotionally catch up to yourself, find out where you are, and ideally share that experience with a trusted other so that we can kind of virtually anyway hold our hands through this crisis, support ourselves through this crisis, and implement the best structures that we can to ensure, again, that we can do it with the minimum amount of worry and anxiety as necessary and be anxious just as much as we need to be. and I shall leave it there.
Aaron, thank you so much indeed